Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today is a little bit of a bittersweet day. It's a day we need to make some hard choices. Now, I did a video yesterday of the harvest of the tomatoes behind me, and today we're going to have to tear those tomatoes out. Now, it's the end of September. You'll probably hear the wind blowing. We're going to be getting several storms, but it's only going to get into the 40s at night for the next couple of days, and it's going to pop back up into the 50s. All of my tomatoes would be absolutely fine. My peppers would be fine. Everything's going to be fine. But it's definitely time to start planting my winter vegetables. Matter of fact, I'm about a week to a week and a half later than I was last year. And I want my winter vegetables to be able to have time to settle in and develop some roots before it gets really cold. So the tomatoes behind me, which are my Roma tomatoes, and like I said, I'll link the video up above that shows when I harvested those. It was a huge harvest, and they were wonderful tomatoes, and they already found a great home because I've used all the tomatoes that I can use this year. And these are going to come out. Let me show you what else is going to come out. Now, I showed you in my harvest how many cucumbers I got, and the cucumbers are going to be taken out now. I actually took out my sunflower that was right there. And I've already started taking out the peppers that I no longer need or am going to use. I harvested all the ones that I could use from there. There's the sunflower. And I'm just going to have to wait until I have room in the trash can to throw these away. But this is the peppers that I'm going to keep, which are quite a few. And they should continue to produce peppers and ripen what they have for the next few weeks. So these are going to be okay for a little while longer. But this is one of the beds that I've chosen for my winter gardening. We're going to do possibly 3 beds. So this is one of them. This is another one. This is where I planted my carrots and parsnips about a month ago, and they popped up and looked beautiful, and then the grasshoppers ate every last single one of them. There's nothing left. So what we're going to have to do is cover these immediately as soon as they're planted. Now, a storm is threatening. I've already been sprinkled on a little bit, so we're going to need to do this quickly. I'm going to put on my gloves because I know this area has had some black widows in it. So I'm just going to get this done as quick as possible. Okay, we're still in a hurry trying to beat daylight, trying to beat the storm. Now that we've got this bed cleaned out, we've got our low hoop house fixed. We've got to fill this bed up. I'm going to link a video up at the top where I filled this bed the first time. There's logs at the bottom, and it's done a lot of settling. Plus, we've grown some really heavy feeders in here. So I'm going to have to add more compost. We're going to use the Oakdale compost. We're going to put some more peat moss in there, and then I've got to go get my vermiculite, and we're going to add vermiculite. Now this is the vermiculite that I use, and I use it to hold water. This holds a lot of water and nutrients. It absorbs it and then it slowly releases it. So when I use vermiculite, I don't have to water as much. Now it's too late tonight to be able to do any of the planting, but we did get this bed completely put back together and redone. It's going to rain tonight, so hopefully that'll water it in. If that doesn't water it in, then I will water this in, and then in a couple of days we'll come back and we'll finish this video and do the planting. Right now, before it gets dark though, I'm going to go run, take apart the cucumber bed and get that ready. Well, it's another day and I finally have been able to get all the garden beds ready that I wanted to get done. Now, I was only going to do 2 of my beds, but then I realized I wanted to plant all of my winter veggies out at the same time, and I needed all 5 beds that I was going to grow over the winter ready. So all of them are ready right now. The plants are set out, and let me show you what I'm going to plant, and then we'll get planting. Now, I'm glad I got these beds ready when I did. We've had about an inch of rain so far. So we actually got this bed ready. And what I did is we have some pepita squash that are not ready here. We've got a couple here, and then we've got one over there. And from what I've heard, these squash will ripen off the vine. And they're so green right now. What I decided to do is just pull the vines out. So I took the roots out and left the vines intact. And as these die down, I'm hoping that these squash will ripen. I've got 5 of them indoors and they're looking good. So we'll just see if we can get these to ripen before it freezes. So in this bed, we're going to do some cabbage and some kohlrabi, some collards. This is chijimisai. And then I went and dug out my green onions out of my other beds, and I'm just going to put them in these beds so they'll be in a bed that can be covered. We're going to plant the exact same things in here. Now I'm trying to give them enough room so that when they get full size, they don't crowd each other too much. And I put these, now the chijimisai is in a regular 4-inch pot, as is this cabbage, because I ran out of the larger pots. But let me show you the size difference between the pots here. But I moved most of the rest of them into really large pots. That's because I wanted them to get as much size as possible while we waited for these garden beds to be ready. Let me show you my top garden beds and what we're going to plant there too. Now these are my fall crops. These are cauliflower that are definitely not heading up. This may be the very last time I do cauliflower in the fall. You know, when I say fall, I plant them in July so that we can harvest them in the fall, but they never seem to head up, and I don't know why that is, but this will probably be the last time I try it. The chiji is huge, and then we have the fadra. It's a Chinese sprouting broccoli. Let me show you what it looks like. This is the point where you harvest it. Now, I do have to say, for some reason, it's a little bit bitter. I don't like it as much as I liked the ones that I planted in the spring. So I harvested all the rest of them. And this is probably the last time I'll grow that in the fall also. So we moved that hoop house over to this bed. This bed used to have my cucumbers, and it's all ready. We've got some kale. I cut back the chard, and the chard is going to come back like gangbusters. These are huge. And they'll come back in overwinter, and then they will flower in the spring, and I'll just remove them then. But we've got cauliflower and kohlrabi in here, and a couple of kale. In here we've got more chard, and look at the difference in size. This cabbage came from the same group. You know, when I planted these, I didn't have enough of the large containers to plant this one, so I just stuck it out in the garden. Now the grasshoppers have been eating it, but it just also has not put on any growth. So growing indoors in these large pots gave these plants a lot of warmth and time and whatever it was that they needed so that they got to be a good size. Now I really, really do want them to be a good size before I plant them out in the garden, because these are not going to grow that much more. It's going to get cold and the days are getting shorter. So what they do is they basically sit in this hoop house, and you can eat the leaves over the winter if you want. But what happens is once it starts getting a tiny bit warm in the spring, these size up like within a couple of weeks, and then you have something to harvest in March. I've actually even harvested in February. Now the chard and kale I will be able to harvest all winter long. Now I decided I'm actually going to leave this hoop house up here. This is where I will put my final, I think this is a collard. So this is where I would put the collard and my final bits of kale, and I've got a really sad looking chard down here. But as soon as I harvest the cabbage, you know, because they're starting to head up right now. These are the ones that I planted in July. As soon as those are done, and also when I harvest the kohlrabi down there, they're sizing up nicely. We've also got a few more collards in here from fall. Another nice size kohlrabi, but this will double that size. But as soon as these are done, I will plant these and have this be my other winter bed. Now today's a little gloomy and it's pretty chilly, but right now I think it's in the 60s, and the rest of the week is going to be in the 70s. Nighttime temperatures are not going to go much below the lower 50s. Tonight's temperature is going to get in the low 40s. But the rest of my garden is still producing like crazy, and these temperatures are not going to hurt the rest of my vegetables at all. So we're still in full gardening swing, and this is the first week in October. So now that we've showed you what we're going to be planting, let's get everything planted and then water them in. Now the roots haven't filled this out completely yet, so they're definitely not root bound. But I planted these, I think, mid-September. Maybe it was the beginning of September. So it's been 4 to 6 weeks since I planted these, and I've been growing them indoors. This one filled its pot just a little bit more. So there we go. Winter gardening season is underway. Everything's planted, fertilized. I'll water it in a little bit. Let's go down at the bottom and look at the bottom beds. And here's the bottom 2 beds. Now what I'm going to be doing, I'm not going to mulch these yet. We're not going to cover them at all for the next little while. We don't have any freezing temperatures in the near forecast or even in the 10-day forecast. So these are going to be just fine uncovered until we start getting close to the 30-degree temperatures. But I will be mulching them before that. This is the old mulch. What I've got to do first is I've got to mow my lawn as soon as everything dries out, and then I'm going to put straw on the top. Now, I've been a bit beyond negligent with my lawn. There it is. Now I do have to say I'm really embarrassed about my lawn. I used to own a high-end residential maintenance business, landscape maintenance business, and keeping my lawn mowed and pristine looking has been an obsession of mine up until this year. And this year, it's the last thing that I've been wanting to do. I have not mowed my lawn probably 4 weeks, which I know is horrible for my lawn, and I'm going to suffer probably, and it'll probably suffer for it next year, but we'll see what we can do about it. Maybe it's time to get rid of the lawn because I just really don't want to take care of it. But anyway, once we mow the lawn, we're going to be putting the lawn clippings on first, and then we're going to put a layer of straw over the top of that. Now the lawn clippings completely decompose over the winter, adds just another layer of organic matter, and it adds some nitrogen to the soil. So that's kind of how I like to mulch them. And since I've been doing that, the soil in my garden beds, even when everything else is frozen solid, does not freeze. And I only end up having to water my beds once or twice over the winter. So we're going to get those watered in really well before the next freeze. We'll water them really, really well and put in that heavy mulch. Cover the plants with frost cloth and then cover the whole thing with greenhouse plastic, and then we'll be good to go. And I think one experiment that I'm going to do, and we'll take you along when it's time to cover the plants, is I'm going to put milk jugs filled with water in half of the beds, one down here and then one up there, and see if there's any difference in the growth of the plants. Because as I said, over the winter they don't seem to grow much, if anything. It's only when it warms up in the spring that they start to grow again. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I love doing experiments, and I'd love to hear if you're growing winter vegetables and what kinds you're growing, and if you are doing any experiments this winter and what you're doing. Now, if this video has been helpful to you, the best thing that you could do for me is share it with your friends, hit the like button, subscribe, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.